In this tutorial, we're going to learn a very simple technique of cutting out images, laying them out in 3D, and then animating a camera around them. Although this is a simple technique, if you think carefully about how you cut your objects out, how you lay the scene out, and how you color the scene itself, you can create a really dynamic feel. And you can see many examples of this being used in Hollywood to really great effect. To start, what we're going to do is create a new Vortal, and we're going to choose the Adaptive Mixed Reality project type. And with that selected, we're going to create a 3D slide. Now you can use a virtual reality slide, even potentially an augmented reality slide, but in this tutorial, we're going to create a 3D slide. We're going to connect up our start node to our 3D slide, and therefore this will be our first presentation. Now, as a quick recap, Vortals uses the camera to denote where the player will show all the content. So the first thing we want to do is load in some content and create that content, put that content in a position relative to this camera. Now, when you load some content, you might find that you get this warning. This warning here is designed to warn you if you're planning on loading this onto a mobile device. And it's just there to tell you that you need to think about the resolution of the images that you're loading. If your images are higher than 4000 by 4000, it's very likely that that won't work on a mobile device. In this case, my image is slightly above 2000 by 2000, so I'm okay with that, and I'm going to choose OK, and I won't see the warning again. Now, I've loaded in multiple images, and they've all loaded in on top of each other, and that will make it very difficult for me to select them. So it's a smart thing to do to start naming your objects when you load them. So here we have our detective. So I'm giving our detective a name. And here we have our text. And finally, this is our background image. And so I'm going to move that into our background. And so you're seeing what I'm doing is I am layering these objects. And I'm layering them relative to this camera. So if I go to my camera position, you can see what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to rebuild this picture, but with some 3D separation. So if I go to my camera view, what I might find is that with my camera selected, it's difficult to actually select any of the objects. So one trick is to press the H key, and that will bring up a selection box, and you can now select the background image. And now you can move it around. So what I want to do is scale this image up and make it actually fit the proportion of the screen. And I want to do the same with the foreground image. And again, I want to do the same with our text box. And so now we have an image that allows us to move, but still looks like a solid image from general certain directions. And what I want to do is create an animated path. So the camera will move from left to right, creating the effect of parallax. So this is what I want to achieve. But I also want to tell more of a story. And so once I'm done with this particular picture, I want to load in another picture which tells a different part of the story. And there are a number of different approaches that you can have. What I'll do is I'll start with this particular approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some more content. So I'm going to position this perpendicular to the original scene that we had created. And so now I have a general system that's set up. It's not quite right, but you're beginning to see some of those effects starting to work. So what I want to do now is actually animate my camera. I want to now go to the animation bar. And with the animation bar, I'll move the camera into the first position that I want, and I'm going to choose Add Keyframe. And then I'm going to move my camera, and I'm going to choose Add Stop Keyframe. And I'll explain what those mean in a second, but then the next thing I want to do is I want to move my camera and rotate it so that it now points towards our new scene. And I'm going to choose Add Stop Keyframe. And then I'm going to move the camera towards that scene and choose Add Keyframe again. I'm now going to choose Looped, and I'm going to choose 10 seconds for the duration of the animation. And finally, I'm going to choose Move with Time and choose 5 seconds for the duration of wait. Now all of this will begin to make sense in a second, but let's go to the camera view and let's choose Hide Animation Lines. And let's choose Play Animation. And you can see that the camera plays until the stop point. And when it hits the stop point, it waits for 5 seconds. And then it moves on to the next section. And again, it stops for 5 seconds before it starts to play. And then because we choose Looped, the animation now loops. So let's stop that and unhide our animation lines. Because while this is somewhat working, it's not quite working like I want it to. So here we have our animation that plays, it stops for 5 seconds, and then it takes this long time to get to this point here. And I don't really want that because that's kind of a bit of an untidy movement, and I don't really want that to be part of my story. But in this current setup, it's quite difficult to make a change. So I'm going to stop this animation again, and what I'm going to do is click on individual times per segment. Now what that means is that the system will let you time each one of these particular segments between the keyframes. So at the moment we have 10 seconds, 10 seconds, and 10 seconds. What I want to do is change that to 5 seconds. And over here, this is our wait time. So I'm going to choose 2 seconds. And for this entire length, I don't want any time to be spent with the camera traveling along that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose 0 for that. And so now, if I play my animation, you'll see the camera move for 5 seconds. It waits for 2, and then magically it pops up over here and keeps playing. And if we go to our camera view and we hide our animation lines, you'll see what this looks like. We see our first scene. We wait 2 seconds. And now we see our second scene. And so this is a way to create an animation that works with multiple storylines in the same 3D space. Now, obviously, when we looked at the second scene, this scene is not yet set up correctly. So what I want to do is actually set it up. Create my background properly, scale it up, make sure that it aligns to the camera properly, and make sure that the aspect ratio is correct. And so you can see that I've now set up a little bit of a story. But the problem is it doesn't lead anywhere. And we're trying to make a choose-your-own-adventure story. So what I want to do now is create a couple of buttons. Buttons that will take me to a new location. So what I want to do is choose button. Button opens a slide and load in a button image. And the first image I'm going to load is a kangaroo. And I choose make button. And here is our kangaroo button that is just loaded in. And I'll load in a second button, again choosing the slide option, and this time I'm going to choose the word kookaburra. I'll make the button and I'm going to move it to the correct location. Now, I better give these a name. Now you'll notice that I had it looped because that helped me when I was testing my animations. But actually I don't want that to loop. I want that to stop when it gets to the end of the animation. So again, if I go back to my camera view, what I want to happen is it to animate. And then now, when it gets to the end of the animation, we'll just have the kookaburra and the kangaroo buttons ready to be pressed. And the animation no longer loops. Now, these buttons have appeared in our 3D slide. And you see we have the kangaroo button and we have the kookaburra button. So what we want to do is create two more slides. One will be the kangaroo button slide, and the other one will be the kookaburra slide. And I'm going to follow the same process that I just did in the previous slides. Now this example only has 3 individual slides and only 2 or 1 cutouts per slide, but there's no limit to how many cutout examples you can use per slide, and there's no limit to how many slides you want to use. All of these are dependent on the story you come up with. So let's have a look at what we've just created. Now obviously I haven't thought very much about the story, and so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And for a choose your own adventure like we have here, you do have to put a little bit more thought into the actual story to let the user feel satisfied at the choices that they've made. But this is a very simple example of how to approach a choose your own adventure 2.5D style animation.